Hello, 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 and welcome to another episode of the Blue Oval Podcast. I am Ben Weissel, and joining me, as always, Garrett Zatlin. How's it going, man?
Do I look any more tan? Do I look any more tan?
Sure, we'll go with that. Yeah, maybe it's
Yes,
the lighting,
sick.
maybe it's because you're actually
N-
tan, but we'll go with your tan.
Look, it's hard to be this naturally, talented, this naturally, good looking. I can't
Uh
help it.
huh.
Okay,
Yeah.
but yeah, this week we are not rushed in our episode. So thank you for everyone for your patience last week. I'm sorry we couldn't get up a video. I promise it's for reasons you don't care about. I wasn't just partying. I was a little bit, but that's not the point. Okay. But I just appreciate everyone's patience. We're back on track this week and I'm ready to get into it. There's like a perfect week of like not too much and not too little, and I think we have a lot of good stuff to analyze.
Yeah, this one feels like we're going to be able to touch on like all the good performances without feeling rushed or feeling like we're missing anything. Like this was like you said, a good balance. We had a lot of people running at the different relays, in particular Penn relays. So we have a lot to get into there. Some individual standout performances that we'll get into as well. But we need to talk about the ratings and reviews because we have hit a wall, Garrett, and we need people to postseason's around the corner. We need people to get into postseason form quickly.
Yeah, not great. But you'd rather it happen now than in the postseason, right? You want to peak in the postseason, and I feel like this is a good was it congruency between our content and between how we actually need everyone to kind of help us out here. So we're almost at 100. Please help us get to 100 on Spotify. We're also on YouTube. We'll continue to put up YouTube again. I apologize. That's my fault for not getting it up. And we'll continue to get that up there. So before we get started, speaking of videos, go check out Lane 9, Alex Phillip podcast, an interview with Brett Hafner that he did last week. That's up. It's a great interview. We've also got a lot of stuff on the site. Also, do know that we do have some rankings coming next week. D2 and D3 rankings are going to be mixed up a little bit along with D1 over these next 2 weeks. So if you're listening to this, just know that. But in the meantime, let's evaluate what happened this past week, and we'll get going.
Absolutely. So where do you want to start?
Let's knock out the relay stuff. Let's knock out Penn relays. We're going to be a little just ignorant towards the 4x8. Sorry, I don't think we're just not going to talk about it, which is kind of unfair. Shout out to Ole Miss and Penn State, though. Those were the favorites, and they did deliver on those wins. But I do think we should just talk about the men's DMR and then the 4x mile/4x15, just because those races have a lot of allure to them at the Penn relays.
Sure. And let's start with probably one of the biggest upsets of the weekend, the 4x1500 meter relay on the women's side. Providence ended up taking the victory. It was a compelling 3-team race for like the last 2 legs. And it looked like Oklahoma State with anchor Bill Jepkuri was going to take it with about 200 meters left. But Providence, and I think it was what was it? Mays,
Kimberly May.
Kimberly
Yeah,
Mays,
Kimberly May.
Kimberly May, just paced herself super well and had a great kick there at the end to pick up the win for her Providence team.
I said in our meet preview for the Penn relays, hey, Providence may have the most underrated lineup in this field. I thought they could be a sleeper team, and I thought they could be, a legitimate upset pick against Stanford and Notre Dame. The problem, however, is that was about their DMR lineup, and Stanford was not in the 4x15. So I kind of had the right mindset, but I just wasn't quite there. It's like so close, but so far. This lineup's great. Like this lineup is very good, and they've been having a very good season. Kimberly May, and we've talked about this before, has been on fire. She's run, well during the indoor track season. Ran 2:42 for 1,000 meters. Ran 4:13 for 1,500 meters at the Rylee relays. Has been just clipping on all cylinders. And now she comes back, takes down a really solid talent in Bila Chepkuri, like a really good talent on a really big stage. But everyone in this relay showed up. Alex O'Neill on the leadoff leg, you kind of get concerned because you're watching her falter back. But like in reality, she actually still ran pretty well. And the
Hmm.
tactical nature of this relay, it was a brilliant way to stagger that lineup and understand that, hey, this is going to be tactical at least a little bit, and people are going to come back to us. So I just thought everything about the lineup order, how they ran it, who was in it. It was extremely well done by Providence across the board.
Yeah, I was a little interested to see, like, when I saw that they had won. I was curious to see how, like who what the lineup was, and I maybe wouldn't have put that. I maybe would have had Flockhart, maybe like maybe in the beginning or the end, but I think they obviously played it perfectly.
Yeah, and it's just kind of interesting. It's like they're getting better. They're all getting better, and Annabelle Eastman comes in there next year, and you're just kind of like, I wonder what happens in the fall, but we won't get ahead of that. It was extremely well done. I want to give Bila Chipkuri some credit.
Hmm.
She's one of the best women of the NCAA. When she begins her kick, she starts it out from afar because she knows herself. She knows what she's good at. And I know it didn't work out this time, but it worked against Simone Plourde, who we'll talk about in a moment here.
Yeah.
It's just really smart awareness from someone as young as herself. I think Chip Curie deserves a lot of credit. She's new to the NCAA. She's new to America for as far as I know. I believe she was in Kenya before this academic year. At least that's my impression. So for her to come over here and just kind of have an understanding at such a young age of how she needs to approach these races and know what her strengths are, I know it didn't work out, but I commend her for kind of understanding what that scenario was like.
Absolutely. So yeah, and then if you look down the rest of the list, not oh gosh, there goes my computer. Um, Not a huge surprise from anybody else. Washington was in the mix for a while. O'Sullivan just struggled there at the end. Georgetown, Notre Dame, kind of the heavy hitters that you expected to be in the mix were right behind that trio of teams. Anything else before we move on?
No, I think that's it.
Alrighty, let's go to the men's 4 by mile, where it was a fantastic finish. We saw, I mean, the first 3 legs, I think they were on for like, if the anchor leg would have run, I think it was like a 3:56, 3:57, they would have gotten under 16 minutes. Obviously, that did not happen with the anchor leg. The anchor leg ended up, I think, Villanova took home the win, and I think their anchor, like Murphy, ran 4:10 or something. So it was a sit and kick 4 by mile. We've seen this before. We've seen some super entertaining races like this at Penn Relays. You call back the Cheserek, Jordy Williams head to head battle there, but this was unique in that there was like 8 teams right there all the way down to the wire. If you were watching that race just like facing everybody, you were just seeing a wall of men coming right at you, and it ended up being Liam Murphy and Villanova taking home the win. But just a spectacular race. Everybody was in it with a lap to go. You didn't, and Murphy looked like he was gonna have not gonna be able to do it because at 200 he was pretty
He
far
was
back,
back. Mhm.
and he made up ground in a hurry.
I have so many thoughts on this race. I have so many thoughts. First off, you gave me a little bit of crap when I made the comparison of like I think he's
Yeah,
like a combination between Jordy Williams and Pat Tiernan. And obviously, like I've said before, that doesn't mean he's Edward Cheserek. That's not what I'm saying. Like, but Liam Murphy, you can't tell me you saw him coming down the final straightaway and you're like, he looks a little bit like Jordy Williams.
yeah,
And Jordy Williams didn't have the range and the cross country aerobic capacity, the 3 kick capacity
no.
that Murphy does. And that's why I said that. And I think that's a take that has now aged nicely for me. I'm just going to say that. But the how do I put this? This is revenge, and this is revenge because Wisconsin took the DMR win
Yep.
just barely over Murphy, and it was a narrow, kind of crushing loss. And now it's Villanova who gets the edge on Wisconsin, kind of like this great redemption finish. This feels like a marquee moment for Murphy in terms of how the NCAA understands how good he is. This is his second win of the season. He got a 1500 meter win over a loaded Duke invite field earlier this year. He's only a sophomore, but his understanding of his competition, his own skills, the way that he understands the nuances of races is extremely impressive for someone as young as himself. I would be very scared to race him. And frankly, like I'm struggling to figure out how he wouldn't be an All-American, or at least all in my All-American picks come June.
Yeah, I don't think you can leave him off at this point. And what he did in the DMR, and we'll talk about that later, was very strong as well. Wisconsin, like Spencer, put together two great races as well in the DMR and the 4x mile. And then there was Washington. I know there was a lot of buzz going into this about, I mean, could they break 16 minutes if they really went for it? They ran a good lineup of all Ellis, Wascom, and Hauser. Those guys all ran fairly well. I know the commentators were very much lamenting about the fact that the anchor legs started so slow. Would you have liked to seen a team, and I think it would have been Washington, really try to push the pace and kind of keep it honest in that anchor leg?
It depends, and I don't know. Like on paper, Washington's the better team out of everyone here. Even
Of
I think
course.
with All in there. I mean, All's a 355 guy. Like All's still incredibly good. Like he's still really good, and he's like their like seventh or eighth option technically for that leg, which is insane. Um, it's really easy for us to like look at the paper and like, well, how about you all just run your PR and then you're set. It's like
Yeah.
it's not that easy. Like it's so hard, and people forget like that Penn relays track is not fast. It's a slow track. It's a big turn track. You're not supposed to run super fast on that. Um, does it make sense on paper? Yes. In reality, I think it's easy for me to like look back and be like, okay, maybe there was an excuse, but maybe not a ton. But like even then, like Ellis and Wascom, like these guys have fast 800-meter, 1,000-meter times, and you'd think that they'd have a little more of turnover, right, in those kind of final moments. Hauser had a great kick at the indoor national meet. He wasn't really kind of able to position himself this time. Um, I struggle. I'll tell you this: the announcers were saying that this is like lazy anchor running.
I know.
What was your take on that?
I felt like that was so harsh. I
That was
think it's just
ridiculous.
it's tactical running. It's not lazy. Like I mean, and again, it brought back almost the entire field, which it makes it maybe a problem. But I mean, you have to be very confident in your abilities, and a lot of these guys are doubling back after running a relay already the day before to go out and be that rabbit that everybody's chasing. And I mean, you look at all these anchor legs, and these are all guys who have run well under 4 minutes in the mile before. So it's not like you going out and running a 355 is going to make it impossible for them to follow you. Like a lot of these guys can go out and do that as well. So I think it just comes down to the fact that there wasn't a huge amount of separation between any of these teams going into that last leg. And I think if Washington would have been had like a 2 second lead going into the anchor leg, then I think Hauser should have gone for it and really pushed the pace. But they didn't. They didn't come in with the lead going in. I mean, and Wascom wasn't able to give them that lead, surprisingly. And I think if you're Liam Murphy, you're sitting there taking I think it was Virginia who took the lead, Connor Murphy and then Liam Murphy as well. Both those guys probably feel good about their kicks and they don't want to be the rabbit. So I completely understood it. As frustrating as it is, you want to see these guys run really fast. And this was a year where we could have seen a really fast DMR or 4x mile time. I thought it made, you look one by one, it makes sense for each person.
Yeah, and I'm in full agreement. And I think there's this misconception. Like, I think we hear this pretty often. It's actually a pretty common phrase that's uttered. It's like everyone thinks they can kick. And it's like I think maybe even if that's true, I don't think everyone thinks that they have the best kick in the field. I think enough guys and women are smart enough, they're in college, they know their competition enough to know like, okay, I may not have the best kick in the field, But that option's still better than me being the sacrificial lamb and going out there and getting
Yeah.
chased. Like, there's no incentive to get a fast time in the 4 by mile or 4 by 15. Like, there's just not until this is an event on the national stage, which I actually love. It's
Yes.
not. It's not worth it. Like, why would you go after it? Play it tactical because that's still your best shot. Um, I think it's easy for me to say this now, but I think I'm hoping that this time next year I will catch myself and be like, it's probably going to be tactical. Calm your
Yeah.
expectations. Understand what's that last leg going to look like. And sure enough, it was the same thing as 2015 when that happened. So
Yeah, yeah. I mean, again, I would have liked to seen someone push the pace, but you have to. It has to be a special circumstances of position and the type of runner for that to
agreed.
happen, and that's why you're just not going to see that all the time.
Yeah, I agree.
Oklahoma State, a little surprised to see them as far back. Masaudi just didn't have his best stuff. It seemed like this weekend in general. Um, Anybody else you wanted to highlight before we move on?
No, that was just such a weird, ending finish. I struggled to really look at that anyone in that top group and be like, oh, that was awful. So
Yeah, fair enough. All right, let's go to the women's DMR where we saw Stanford take home a convincing victory over Oklahoma State. Virginia ended up third. Melissa Tanaka, great first opening leg to get Stanford in the runner-up position behind Boston College, who had Catherine Mitchell again. She makes us look so
great.
smart
Yeah.
every week. We're like, wait, she's primed for good things, and then every
Yeah.
week she goes out and does it. Looked great in that opening leg to give Boston College the lead, but Stanford again, Melissa Tanaka continues to be an unsung hero of putting them in great position so that Willis and Whitaker just have to lead from the front. They're out of the way, and they just go and run fast times to lead Stanford to the victory. Um, Super impressive performance from that whole team. Um, I think that's all I have to say. Everybody else ran solid times, but Stanford clearly the class of the field.
I have nothing to add. I mean, they're just better. They're just flat out better. And I think that's not a surprise.
And this
So,
is a situation where you do see like someone pushing the pace and them running a fast time, where it's like someone who's comfortable, like in Whitaker, running on her own in that anchor leg in the 1600 to be able to push the pace, and she has a big lead to work from. And like that's the situation where you see these quick times rather than in situations where if she was not up by a lot or wasn't as comfortable running on her own a fast time, then she probably would have sat back and this would have been another sit and kick finish. But those
well, and
those
you
all those
also,
factors came together.
yeah, I mean, the Catherine Mitchell thing is like she opens up that lead and it kind of makes the race fast from the gun. If she's on the anchor leg, and she very well could have been,
Yeah.
the complexion of this race evolves in a very different way. And I think it kind of allows the field to come in a little bit more. It kind of made this maybe a little bit more interesting. I like what Oklahoma State did. I
Yeah.
thought them putting Chip Curry on the anchor leg was a smart move. They did that twice this past
They did.
weekend. I think it's just good coaching. Dave Smith made the really right call there, and I just liked it. It was just smart. So other than that, I guess I'm like a really big Chip Curry fan this weekend, as I have been all season. But I like that move, and I asked for that move in the preview when we got it. So yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. She had a very good weekend. No, didn't pick up any wins, but looked like put Oklahoma State in great position in both of
yep,
those races.
yep.
All right, let's go to the men then on the DMR side. Wisconsin took home the win over Villanova, Virginia finishing third. This was another situation where we didn't get a super fast last 1600, but it wasn't nearly as slow as the 4 by mile. Spencer took home the win for Wisconsin, running 4:02 in that last leg. Great finishing kick. Beating Murphy the first time out before Murphy turned the tables in the 4 by mile. Some interesting results, though, as you kind of look further down. Again, Oklahoma State, not the best day. Ole Miss coming off They did win that 4x8, but weren't were competitive, but just weren't able to close that gap on the top two ultimately. What were your big takeaways from this performance?
Abduhali Hassan is the MVP of this race. It's not
Yep.
close. I'm sorry, Adam Spencer. I know you kicked home for the win, but it's Abduhali Hassan. He's the 800-meter leg, splits 147, which is almost a full 1.5 seconds faster than just the next fastest 800 split. Not even if I think the next fastest team, but this guy's good. Like this guy's really picking up some momentum. Showed some signs during the tail end of the indoor track season. Now he's on fire. Just ran 146. Like he has the pedigree, and now puts in a time like that where Wisconsin wasn't really in it until his
Mhm.
leg. And then you kind of see what he does, catches up on the gap, and Spencer's good over the last lap. I know we didn't really get to see that at Brian Clay because he got tripped up a little bit, but as
Yeah.
long as he was going to be in position, that would have been huge. And I think I don't know if he gets in position, and this is not me saying he was or he wasn't going to be in position, but I don't know how if he's able to make that move, if Hassan doesn't put him there. And for me, I think Hassan is just clearly the MVP of that race, and he should be he should be given the trophy to hold, the wheel to hold. So
Yeah, I mean, he had the fastest split by far in that 800 leg. He like flew past people in the last 150. It was wild. They looked like they were standing still the way he moved past them. So yeah, absolutely great leg for them because I mean, coming after the first two legs, they were in seventh and then finished his leg in first, gave Spencer the lead, and that they just didn't look back from there. So absolutely. And I'm looking through everything else. Nothing else really caught my eye on this one. Again, the teams that you thought would be up there were, um, and there weren't a whole lot of surprises.
no, yeah, it's all pretty straightforward, which is I guess that means good racing, maybe,
Yep.
right?
Yeah. All right. Well, let's close up on the relays then. And let's talk about some of the individual performances that we saw this weekend. Not a ton, but we did see some impactful performances, especially when you consider the overall NCAA title picture. And there's no better place to start with that in mind than the 800 in Navasky Anderson. He ran 147 this past weekend. I think this was his first race in the 800 since NCAA's where he got DQ'd. 147, obviously not something that's mind blowingly fast, but a very good performance shows that he is in shape and ready to go to get his revenge, hopefully, at NCAA's and be able to close out for his first title.
Yeah, I don't really have anything to say about this. It's about right, comfortable win. Like we know he can run faster. He's healthy. He's projecting at the right time. Kind of similar trend as to what he did during the winter months. I
Yep.
don't really have anything about this, but it's a good result.
Yeah, I think it's just good to show that he is fit and I should be another a challenger for the national title.
Yeah.
Um, Elsewhere, Colin Sahlman, 146.99 in the 800, continuing his hot streak over the last few weeks after running a good 1500 meter at Brian Clay. So does this do you think he'll move to the 800 or you think he's still a
Uh,
1500 guy?
I think he's a 15 guy. I think just like now this is just validation of what he's done because
Yeah.
now he has the endurance, he has the speed. But it's insane that a 1342 guy is also running 146.99 and like beating convincingly Sebastian Gentile,
Hmm.
who's a 146 guy and a pure 800-meter runner. So, like, if I'm Salman, I'm like, I think I like the 1500 as an option better. Um, just because I think it blends his the two greatest aspects of his strengths the best. I don't know if that made any sense. It did in my mind. But his versatility is insane. Like no rookie should have this kind of versatility at this high of a level.
Hmm.
It's just absurd. And I was going through the national leaderboard, and I was like, I don't know who else would be favored for freshman of the season, like our end of season awards. Like it'd have to be him,
Yeah.
unless I'm missing something. Unless like some
Someone
true
comes out of
rookie
the yeah.
out of the woodwork and they start at the national meet, kind of like Fuad Masaudi did. But like this is an incredible resume. It's really good.
Yeah, absolutely. I I'm tempted to see him in the 800, but I ultimately agree. I think the 1500 meter is where he will end up thriving. It'll be fascinating to see what he does in his first NCAA experience. Hopefully, he makes it through regionals all right. Because I just am eager to see him in that more tactical setting where this 800 shows that he should be even better
Yeah, yeah, and I just don't know. I still think he's inexperienced, but he's beating. It's not just he's just running fast, but like he's beating a lot of really good names, like a
in.
lot of really good names, and get names who are running fast when they're racing him. And I just think it's like it's still hard trying to figure him out. Is I think the biggest point that I'm trying to make.
Yeah.
But man, he's just a special talent, and it's like finally, this is what we were trying to see after he was kind of a little bit of a quieter cross country and indoor track season, and now to kind of see what he's been doing is uniquely special, like really, really special. So
Absolutely. On the women's side in the 800, we saw Rylee Penn, 201. Big performance there. We also saw Olivia Howell, I think, run a small PR of 202, beating Dorcas Iwa, running 203. Big takeaways from the women's 800 performances this weekend.
Howell is actually, I think, the biggest one. Penn continues to be the biggest breakout star, maybe of the season, or at least one of them. I'm still can't believe we just didn't nominate her for end of season awards for most improved. It was just ridiculous in retrospect. But she'll get in there this season. She's great, but given her 1500 success, she was probably trending to run something pretty quick. This is maybe a little quicker than expected. But Howell's now got this second 202 mark of the season. She just took down Ewall. I think she just took down Sarah Hendrick. She took down the D2 national title favorite in Yukivia Beckwith. And I'm sorry if I'm butchering that. This is a really solid win. Like this should not be ignored as like a passive win, but this is Hal stepping down in distance to her secondary event, running her second 202 mark of the season and taking down a very accomplished field. I really like it a lot. And like she's kind of following this similar trend that Michaela DeGeneiro followed last year, where it's like, hey, can you prove to us in the spring months like that mile title wasn't a fluke? And I think we're kind of getting that, maybe not perfectly, but a little bit from Hal. I think she's kind of proving like, yeah, I am really this good.
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest question mark we had coming through the indoor season with Howell was, just does she have the raw fitness to be able to compete? And that was one of the biggest reasons why we didn't feel comfortable picking her super highly at NCAAs. But then she goes out and does what she does to win that 1500, backs it up again in the outdoor season with these fast 800s. Like you're just seeing that her raw fitness has taken a huge step forward. And you pair that with what has been always a very good tactical acumen on her from her, and you just have a runner that is going to be almost impossible to beat, like when she's on her A game at this point. Like if her fitness is where we think it is after the last like 2 months, I don't think she'll be beaten unless she makes mistakes.
I don't know if I'd say she won't be beaten, but I think this bleeds into a really interesting topic, which is Lauren Gregory's out for the season.
Yep.
And I think Gregory was viewed as a title contender in the 15 or the 10K this season, depending on what you thought she was going to go after. And like not having to deal with her is like suddenly a huge weight lifted off of Howell's shoulders. I think for those who didn't see, Gregory sustained a navicular stress fracture in her right foot at the NCAA championships in the closing stages of that mile final, which makes her race like that much more impressive, by the way. Yeah. It's insane. But she's out for the season. She's apparently signed a contract. This is all per Whole Hog Sports, Nate Allen and Matt Jones of that website. Shout out to them. But I mean, her being out of that picture, I think, changes the complexion. And also depends on what you think Plourde is going to run, you know, what you think Margot Appleton's going to run, so on and so forth. It's an interesting conversation. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, I mean, speaking of the 1500 meter, let's just go there. So we saw on the women's side, Simone Plourde run 410. And we also saw Everlyn Kemboi run a converted 412. I feel like both of these women just run well on the same weekends every week. Like
Yep.
I feel like we've talked about them almost every single episode so far this outdoor season. I mean, for Plourde, I don't know what she should do, man.
Yeah, I don't know.
I feel like I say something different every single
I
podcast.
know.
Like
I know.
I'm like I definitely think she should run the 15, and then she runs a 5. I definitely think she should run a 5K, and now we're back to like, man, she just ran a 4:10. Like you said, I think the other contenders in this event very much Howell and Margot Appleton. I think Appleton will almost certainly run the 1500, but man, I do not know what to do with Plourde. I would say 1500 maybe just because you don't have to go up against Tui, but that's literally the only reason I can think about not going to the 5K.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's fair. Yeah. I don't. I think she runs 15 just because it's less crowded up top.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think there's a shot that she wins. Like I think she's a title contender in the 15. She's not in the 5K. And I think that's just the reality of the situation. I think she just goes 15 for that very reason. Unless you think the 5K is going to be so tactical that her 1500 comes into play. But Tui's there. Valby, as we'll talk about, will be there. You know, it has to be the 15. It just still makes more sense. The fact that she can do the 410 for Kemboi, though, I think this it's one of those same conversations of altitude converted marks don't really tell me that you have speed, but it does tell me that like you're not completely void of being competitive over those shorter distances. I think it has a little bit of impact. For 412 conversion's not playing around. Like 417 at altitude's really solid. It's not amazing, but solid. And I just think like she's really beginning not to be undervalued, but maybe underappreciated in terms of what she's bringing to the table. She's just at an entirely new level this year.
I think it's validating in the sense that we've seen her throw down some pretty good kicks at the end of races, have some decent turnover, and then this kind of shows that hey, that turnover is there running that converted 412. She obviously has the strength. We've seen that in the 5K and the 10K, and then you go to altitude and run a 1500 where you're relying a little bit more on that strength. So no surprise there to see her put down a good mark, but I was surprised to see her run quite this fast, and I think it is just again validating of the speed that we've seen in bursts in those longer events. So yeah, really good for her.
I think her speed though in those races, like I think more specifically to that Brian Clay 5K. Was it Brian Clay or was it Stanford Invite 5K? Brian Stanford, screw it, one of the two, and she was facing Plourde, and it's not like a traditional kick where she's like sitting, and then goes.
Right.
She gapped the field and then just pulled away with an extra gear. It feels more of a strength-based finish, a lot like Bilep Chipkuri, actually. So I think it's identical in that sense, but the fact that she can do it and that it's strength-based, just like this altitude conversion suggests, I think it's a good blend, and I think it just validates kind of like you were saying, just what she's done as of late.
Yeah, and I think it just shows that, while she's best suited towards a quicker race where she can kind of squeeze the pace down and squeeze away from everybody over a few laps, she can turn it on a little bit as needed. So yeah, really, I mean, again, like you said, hopefully not underrated at this point after the last few weeks, but if anybody thinks that she isn't a double All-American threat or favorite at this point, really, then you're certainly underappreciating her. So she is on fire. But let's talk about the 5K. And we mentioned we weren't sure about what Plourde will do and if the 5K might be tactical. And I think us seeing Parker Valby run 15:32 by herself tells us that it's probably not going to be tactical because she is going to be around, and any race with Parker Valby is not going to be a slow race. So it's good to see her healthy, but it also changes the complexion of this event and how it's going to be run at nationals more than likely. So a significant performance for everyone.
It's a huge performance. It's a massively impactful performance. It changes our perception of an entire race and how it's going to run, and even what Tui will have to win gold. And I still think she's heavily favored. it doesn't really tell us anything other than like, hey, Parker Valby is healthy and
Yep.
enough at least to run 15:32 solo. She's probably going to be competitive, and the field at the national meet will probably have to work around her. I don't know
She
how she does it. Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
she's ahead of schedule from last year, right?
I
Like
was going to say, so isn't she ahead of schedule, right? Like, I
because
don't
she
know
didn't
how she
show up
does it.
till SECs last year.
Let's take a glance, shall we? Let's take a quick glance. I'm going to scroll down here. I've got Parker Valby, and she ran. She was a DNF in the 5K at the North Florida Invitational, which is exactly the
Exact
race
same race.
the exact same race, or at least they're calling the UNF East Coast Relays. It's the same thing. And so she was a DNF in that race. And then, what do you think her 5K time was at the SEC Outdoor Championships?
Was it 15:32?
15:32. She ran 15:32.44. She ran 15:32.41 last year.
Oh my. That's hilarious.
That's metronomic in terms of what she could do. And so now you're looking at this and you're like, what? She's a week ahead of schedule. She's 2 weeks ahead of schedule. I'm trying to think.
2 weeks.
She's 2 weeks ahead of schedule, which is like just such a stupid conversation to be having. But like, it is amazing how we can be like, she's not even racing to like
All we
what
need is one good performance.
we just need one. I don't know how that's just raw talent. It's just such incredible raw talent. I just hope people appreciate it. It's not just a fast race. It's raw talent to be able to do that.
And I mean, we're kind of joking about her being 2 weeks ahead of schedule, but we're also kind of not because you can see
Exactly.
what she can do with limited amount of time. So 2 weeks for most people in terms of like getting an extra 2 weeks to gain fitness might not be that big of a deal. But for Valby, that might as well be half the season for her to
Mm-hmm.
be able to gain
Mm-hmm.
fitness. And so, I
It
mean,
is
for
half a
her to get
season. Like,
yeah, exactly.
right.
So for her to get that is huge. And just, I mean, she ended up running great at outdoor championships last year and now having a little bit more of a head start, albeit not a ton. But again, every week is precious for her. For her to get a little bit of a head start is going to put her in a great spot, hopefully, at NCAAs.
Yeah, I don't have anything more. It's just a fascinating development. It doesn't really mean a whole lot other than like she's healthy, will be competitive, and will be on the national stage probably.
Yeah.
So that's all I have, but just an interesting development there.
All right, let's finish up with the steeplechase. On the men's side, we saw Christian Baker run a nice 8:38. Elsewhere, we saw Zach Yeager 8:40, Tom Seitzer 8:41, and then I think in that same race as Baker, we saw Luke Lebet run 8:41. All very good performances from them. Again, in this loaded steeplechase era for the men, they're gonna have a tough time cracking. I think that top group that finals at NCAA's, but I mean, very good performances still.
Yeah, I mean, like, I like what we saw to Christian Baker. 8:38. He barely edged out Reese Smith, by the way, the D2 national championship in the steeplechase, who has an 8:33 PR. I mean, that's not like a no. I mean, he beat him by 0.02 seconds, but like that's you're competitive, right?
A
Like
win's a win.
a win's a win, and top collegiate, he wasn't even the winner, but like I think we
Right.
get what we're saying here. I mean, it's still a really nice result. Did I want to go to the Penn relays real quick? Did you see that race, by the way?
I did not. No, I missed that one.
Wild race. So again, Zach Jager runs 8:40. Tom Seitzer, Notre Dame, 8:41. I had written in our preview for Penn Relays that Georgia Tech just had been quiet on the distance side this year and hadn't really done a whole lot. And then this guy runs like a 16-second personal best, outkicks Tom Seitzer, who's a very good steeplechaser. He was like an 8:42 guy before this weekend. This guy runs 8:40, wins Penn Relays, outkicks Seitzer, who runs an 8:41 1-second PR. It's a great race. Kind of like you said, I don't really know what this really tells us. But these are all just good performances though. And Jager probably gave me one of the better races of the weekend, honestly.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think good stepping stone for these guys. Like we talk about a lot in the steeplechase, you don't necessarily see super fast times this early in the season. So for them, if they can continue this momentum, maybe they'll be much more of a factor than we expect come May.
Why do you think that is? Why have we had this conversation? Like, why we think the steeplechase is just so
I
late,
don't. I have no idea. Like
right?
I have never really been because I mean, some of like at Belmont we always had some good steeplechasers, and this is just how it would go generally. I mean, they would be peaking at regionals, and you'd have to run the fastest time of your season or your life at regionals to be able to give yourself a chance at nationals. And it's just a weird. I don't know if it's just because you're finally putting together everybody like the best fields, and the steeplechase is one of those events where it's not usually tactical. So in a championship setting, you got the best kind of field. Everybody's going to be pushing each other, and so that translates to faster times. I really have no idea.
Yeah, I keep thinking about that, and like, for everyone's like, well, they all, peak in the postseason. It's like, yeah, but no one peaks in the postseason quite like steeplechasers. Like, the times dramatically like drop, which is a good thing for steeplechasers. But I never understood it. I still don't understand it. I don't entirely get. If someone has a suggestion, they can comment on Apple Podcasts or
There you go.
Spotify, or go subscribe on YouTube. Hey, there you go. Yeah, do it there. We'll read it.
Question of the week right there. Yeah, and
Yeah,
you're right, because like you look at like the performance list at the end of any season, you're not, for any other event, you're not going to see like regionals or NCAA like events where you're seeing those times show up at the top of the leaderboard. But you always will in the steeplechase. The steeplechase, like when you're looking at the performance list, when people ran the fastest times, it's always at conference championships, regionals, or NCAAs, and it's just a very unique phenomenon to that event.
let's move to the women. We'll wrap up there. Kaylee Mitchell and Grace Featherston Haw, both of Oregon State, 9:39, 9:45 respectively. They go 1-2 at their home meet convincingly. And then Kayla Windemuller, nice run for her, 9:51 in
Yep.
the steeple. Michigan veteran there. She snags a nice win over Caitlin Stewart Barnett of Michigan State, Big Ten rival. She also had a nice PR in that race of 9:56. Thoughts?
No thoughts on the Oregon State women. Good race. This is what we expect from them. They're excellent runners. So for them to run this isn't much of a surprise. For Wyndham Mueller, though, I really like this performance. A nice step forward for her. We haven't seen a whole lot of out of her this year, and so I really like to see this big steeplechase performance.
Yeah, she's been really quiet this year, like
Mm-hmm.
since the cross, and it's just been kind of like a, man, can you give us a little bit more? But and she finally did. And like it's another one of those things where I don't get it, but people are just different in the steeplechase. They're just completely different runners, and I don't get it. I don't know why. I don't know. I'm like, why can't we translate it? It's just it should be easier. You're racing without barriers, But like Windemuller, and here's the thing: Windemuller is accomplished outside the steeplechase. Like, she is good. Just for whatever reason, she's just had a little bit of a slower buildup. But I like this spot for her. I think she has a 9:47 PR, so like she's not that far off from where she was last year. And I think she's actually, this is a good performance at a good time, and she wasn't really even pushed. So something to monitor. I'm not going to look too heavily into it right now, but a nice run and a solid performance.
Excuse me. Absolutely. All right. Anything else before we wrap it up?
I just want to say we got a very nice email. It is, and I won't even say from who. All we just got was an email saying, "Best money ever spent!" 3 exclamation marks. It's just like,
Wow.
it was very kind. It was very kind. And guess what? It is the best money you're ever going to spend. Go on TSR, go grab a Boost subscription. We do appreciate that. And, listen, you'll get interviews. We're trying to build up the site, get some rankings, more content, analysis, rankings. Like, I think I said rankings twice, but that's because there's a lot of rankings. But yeah, go check it out. I do think it's nice. And everyone gets a 14-day free trial for all first-time users. So go check that out. Apple Podcasts, Spotify, go leave ratings and reviews there. I'm trying to figure out what else. YouTube, subscribe, comment, do whatever. I'm sorry, I will actually get the video out this week. And then stay tuned. We got a lot more coming.
Absolutely. All right. Well, until next week, Garrett, I'll talk to you.
I'll talk to you.